we inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to The Core here on American Family Radio. Walker WIldmon here with you on this brand new edition of the program. AFR.net is our website. AFR.net is our website. You can listen to this show and all past episodes over at AFR.net. We have both the live streaming option for the live audio of the American Family Radio. We also have past episodes, otherwise known as podcasts, there at AFR.net. Proverbs chapter 30 is where we have been this week, looking at verses 5 and 6. Proverbs chapter 30, 5 and 6. Every word of God is tested. He is a shield to those who take refuge in him. Do not add to his words, or he will reprove you, and you will be proved a liar. That's Proverbs chapter 30, verses 5 and 6 as our scripture for the week. One thing coming up that I want to make you aware of, and I've mentioned this at least once in recent weeks, but iVoter Guide is having candidate training, campaign training rather, for those who want to run for public office, or if you want to be a campaign manager or a communications staffer on a campaign. If you want to have anything to do with campaigning for public office as a Christian, iVoter Guide is offering an excellent training course. These are live, and they're actually there's only two sessions left. So these classes started on October 15th. They're going to run through November 5th, once a week, every Wednesday. And so if you're listening to this program, then there's two more of these sessions left, one on the 29th of this month of October, next week, and then another one on the first Wednesday in November, the 5th. If you go over to iVoterGuide.com, iVoterGuide.com on the homepage there, if you scroll down just one page length, if you will, you'll see the question posed, do you think God might be calling you to run for office? Right there you can click register for the free online class, and Debbie Wuthnow, president of iVoter Guide, and others will be leading this class over the next few weeks. And so it's a great opportunity for anybody interested in public office, interested in campaigning for public office, to take this online course with iVoter Guide. You can go over to iVoterGuide.com. Right on the homepage, scroll down, you'll see a tab where you can register for this free online course. And there's two opportunities left, October 29th and November 5th. Well, here we are. The government is still shut down, and there's really no sign of letting up on behalf of the Democrats and President Trump. And so the basic demand that Chuck Schumer has put forth is about $1.5 trillion of additional spending on Democrat wish list priorities, including health care, health insurance, health coverage for illegal immigrants. That's one of the things that the Democrats are pushing for around the country. And so, yes, you can't make this stuff up. The formerly Babylon Bee articles are now becoming a reality. Another thing that's becoming a reality that's very concerning that we need to be aware of as Americans is the existential threat of Islam in America. And that quote, existential threat, is from Congressman Chip Roy out of Texas. He called recently, the spread of Sharia law from Islam an existential threat to America. And there's a link to this American Family News story that we'll link to on the show notes that I'll send over to Bobby. But this importing of Islam in America is becoming very problematic, practically speaking, becoming very problematic. And when I say importing, the reason I say that is because in large part, the spread of Islam in America has not happened organically through people converting to Islam. Now, there is some of that, but the vast majority of those in America that subscribe to Islam have immigrated to America, mostly legally, by the way. They've immigrated to America through refugee programs and other programs. And then, of course, they set up roots here. Many of them become American citizens through the citizenship process. And then they begin having children and raising families here under the ideology and the religion that is Islam. And so that's how much of this happened. When you look at Minneapolis, Minnesota, when you look at Dearborn, Michigan, and these are populations that are heavily that are made up heavily of immigrants, mostly legal immigrants, and they were subscribing to Islam before they even immigrated here. Okay, so we've when I say we've imported Islam into America, in large part, that's what I'm talking about. This didn't happen organically. This was done by our government leaders, and this naive view of Islam that was held by the Bush administration and definitely the Obama administration with their work with the Muslim Brotherhood. This naive view of Islam as treating it as just another religion, right? Or as as many people have falsely claimed, the quote religion of peace. The reality is that Congressman Chip Roy is correct. Sharia law and Islam broadly is an existential threat to America. Now let me explain. When you look at the core tenets of the Muslim religion, that is a false religion, by the way, Christianity is the only true religion. But when you look at the tenets of the Muslim religion, the Muslim teachings in the Quran, the core tenets of Islam are incompatible with the Western constitutional republic that we have in America. Incompatible with various elements of the U.S. Constitution, including the Bill of Rights. And so, what do you do when you have an entire religion and an entire people group that's core fundamental religious tenets are at direct, not indirect, are direct odds with America's founding documents and laws? That's the clash that we're getting in areas like Dearborn, Michigan, Minneapolis, and other areas. You see, Islam is not a religion of peace. Our military spent decades in the Middle East trying to police Muslims, trying to police the Middle East. And the most recent iteration of this, from a international affairs vantage point that you can resonate with, that you can recognize, is Hamas. Is Hamas. And then you have Iran, and you have other sects as well, SECTS. And people who are Middle East experts can explain to you all the differences between the different segments of Islam in the Middle East. But nonetheless, we're at a place where America is going to have to decide, are we going to continue turning a blind eye to the hard truth that allowing more Muslims to immigrate into America is a bad idea. It is in direct conflict with America's laws and America's Constitution. And now there's these stories, these reports of Sharia law, of elements of Sharia law being implemented on U.S. soil. There are various reports of even law enforcement creating these no-go zones in some of these Muslim-majority cities and neighborhoods where they just don't go there anymore. They just let the Muslims kind of police themselves. Not good. And what the left has done, and they'll probably pick up this segment, by the way. I'll almost call it. They'll pick it up. Southern Poverty Law Center, Right Wing Watch, they'll pick it up. They'll blast this, headline. Walker Wildman says Muslims shouldn't be allowed in America. That'll be the headline. But here's the reality. And they've made this topic toxic. The left I'm talking about. The Democrats, the left, and the media, they have made this conversation that we're having right now toxic because they'll say that you're Islamophobic. They'll pull all the phobics out. They'll say you hate Muslims, and they'll pull you're a bigot, you're mean, you're intolerant. They'll pull all these things out to demonize, to belittle, to shut down discussion. They don't want to talk about it. They just want to demonize. They want to shut you up. They want to shut you down. And so America's leaders, in large part, now President Trump is an exception, and others, they see the threat here. They see the problem. But much of America's leaders, both Republican and Democrat, they don't want to have this conversation. They don't want to talk about this, right? Because they don't want CNN to call them an Islamophobe or intolerant. They don't want to have to face that pressure, face this conversation, face those accusations. But when you have an entire religion that is at direct odds with the Judeo-Christian principles of the foundation of this country, why would you continue importing that? Why would you continue importing that? Other nations, China, Russia, Iran, etc., they don't import immigrants that they know are at direct odds and have a fundamental conflict with the laws and the Constitution of the country. It's called self-preservation. And to show you how out of hand this is, the Muslim population in many states makes up a large voting bloc for the Democrats. This is why you have Democrat voters and politicians shouting "Free Palestine," "From the river to the sea," and all other anti-Semitic and anti-Christian, by the way. It's not just anti-Semitism. A lot of it's anti-Christian rhetoric. Some of it leads to radical jihad, Islamic terrorism. If you're interested in preserving the nation, which our leaders should be, you should only allow people to immigrate to America that are in alignment with America's founding precepts, ideals, constitution, and laws. From a self-interest vantage point, it makes no sense to allow people to immigrate to America that don't like America and don't like American ideals. It doesn't make sense.
At the Core podcast are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to this edition of The Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us on today's program. I want to jump to our next guest. Stephen Ashton is with us. Stephen is National Director of Marketing at Trail Life USA. Great ministry, great organization, helping young boys, young men grow to be godly leaders. Stephen, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Walker. Glad to be here.
Well, Stephen, before we jump into this topic, this latest study on young boys and the effects of video games, give us a little background and tell folks a little bit about Trail Life USA.
Trail Life USA is a Christ-centered, boy-focused program that uses outdoor adventure as an on-ramp to connect boys with dads and dad-likes. We are in over 1,400 churches with about 64,000 members across all 50 states. And so we are really excited to see men engaging with boys in meaningful ways and to grow the church.
Amen. Amen. Stephen, this report, if it's the same report you've been looking at, looked at young boys recently over the last 6 months and the effects of video games on them. And obviously you guys are basically offering the alternative with Trail Life USA and outdoor activities, etc. But talk about the harms of video gaming it, especially video gaming it for hours each day.
Yeah, well, this study showed that for every additional hour a boy spends gaming from age 7 to age 10, they predict a 2% drop in academic motivation. That's concerning. But really, if we think about this, Walker, it makes sense. Boys are motivated by challenge, by risk, and by adventure. Back in 1929, Harrison Sackett Elliott said that satisfaction without growth means stagnation. When we look at what boys experience in video games, stagnation without growth means stagnation. It's meeting all the needs of a boy. Score is kept, right? I can win or I can lose. So many places where a boy goes today in sports, we have winless sports. In school, too many boys are just caught in a failure cycle. Boys account for double the ADHD medication that girls do right now. 2/3 of learning disabled students are boys. And so boys are struggling at school. They've found a lot of boys feel like school is just a game that's rigged against them. 1969, 40% of college students were female. By 2009, 40% were male. And that trend is continuing, Walker. It's still the same number to this day. And so boys have found the refuge in video games where score is kept and the challenge is clear and friends can come alongside and be part of this and the rewards are consistent and victories are celebrated. And so when they can get that dopamine hit really easily and progressively, it's made to get boys hooked. And it's being really effective. And so when a boy goes to school and he's not getting those dopamine hits and he's not, and his victories aren't celebrated, and maybe he's not getting victories at all, he's caught in a failure cycle. And where does he go, to be motivated to do this kind of stuff? And of course, that's going to be a struggle.
Yeah, you're right. And you're what you're alluding at is something deeper than just video games, but it's this, quote, safe place that everybody's trying to create, right, in American culture, where everybody gets a trophy or nobody gets a trophy. You just compete and nobody gets a trophy because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But the reality is that through competition, through challenges, and through winning and losing, whether it's on test scores at school or on the baseball field, this is where lessons are learned. This is where life lessons are taught, of course, in a much less risky environment, right, than the real world when you become an adult. But still, going through activities and things like Trail Life puts together, this is how kids learn. This is how they fail, and then you teach them through their failures how to become better and how to not fail again. But we've created this kind of what we think is a safe environment, right, with everybody getting a trophy. But kids they're going to find those dopamine hits. They're going to find that competition somewhere. And what you're talking about is they're finding it in these video games, but the video games are having negative consequences on their academic performance.
Absolutely. Well, I'll bet, Walker, you probably grew up about the same time I did. We're close to the same age, I'm guessing. And when I was growing up, I went out and I rode my bike all over the neighborhood. And I found all kinds of trouble, whether that was playing down in the woods and building forts or building ramps and jumping over through. How many kids can you jump over on a bike, right? And what would mom do today? If we lined up 3 kids on and we set up a ramp, we tried to see if we could jump over the kids. But that was what we did as a kid, and we didn't think twice about it.
Right.
And we learned from our mistakes, but we got our dopamine hits in a real way, and we weren't hesitant to go outside and find friends to go play with. It wasn't a big deal, but our culture today so strains those things, and we're so nervous and so afraid of what our kids might experience out there. But in these video games and online, what are our kids experiencing there? We have a very similar problem, but we feel like it's safe because it's in our home. But I fear that we're actually doing more damage to our kids in creating these, quote, safe spaces, as you called them, because really they're anything but.
Yeah, they are, and it's in an environment where pornography is available in mass, and the the video games are frequented by the hours every day by young people, and then you've got kids being told by adults that, oh yeah, you can change your gender, you can have surgery, we'll give you hormones, you can be homosexual, whatever the deviancy they're pushing of the day. And all that is treated as like normal and just part of culture. But then to your point, we want to like play a game where we see how many of our peers we can jump over on our bike when we're hitting a ramp. And then everybody goes, no, call the lawyers, call Department of Health and Human Services. We got to arrest these parents. This is dangerous, right? And everybody loses it. And the Karen comes out of her house in the neighborhood. Nobody can have fun anymore. But it's like we've got our risk inverted, right? The things that are in real life really not that risky, right? Like riding your bike has now become this thing that everybody's got to be afraid of. And then this gender identity garbage and playing video games and violence and all this stuff and sex is now become the norm amongst young people. I mean, we've really got our threats out of order, if you will.
Well, and boys need rough and tumble play. Studies have found that it actually develops the frontal lobe of the brain. And so as we take these things away in these spaces where boys can go and be boys, one of the slogans we have in Trail Life is let boys be boys, because a boy needs a space anymore. We talk about safe spaces, but honestly, a boy needs a place where it's safe to be a boy. We have so much discussion about toxic masculinity, and I hate that term because masculinity can't be toxic. Masculinity cannot be toxic. Masculinity is a virtue. You can't have too much courage. You can't have too much strength. You can't have too much character. Those things that comprise what masculinity is. And we even talk about biblical masculinity, but I hesitate to go there because then we define types of masculinity. And God designed masculinity in the garden, and he said that it was good and it's necessary. And we need to put boys in spaces where they're challenged. And that's the heart of Trail Life. That's what we're doing, Walker. We're putting boys out in the woods, and we're surrounding them with godly men who are going to teach them what it means to be a man. And not only are we doing that, the other exciting thing that's happening in Trail Life is we're seeing men step up and lead and find their band of brothers. And we're seeing the church having a place where men can come and find their place and find their community. Because let's face it, we don't do that by sitting around sipping coffee. We don't do that sitting across from the table and talking about our feelings. Our wives might do that really well and really naturally. But Walker, you and I are never going to become great friends just by, sitting across the table and sharing our feelings. We need to get out and do something together. And I can go to my neighbor and say, hey, do you want to come hear the preacher this Sunday? And you know what he's going to say, right? Not really. But if I say, hey, my son and I are going to shooting guns with a bunch of guys, you want to come along? Now we've got an on-ramp. Now, not only do I have a space where my son and I are going to build a relationship, but now I can bring my neighbor along and he and his son can build a relationship. And we could start to develop some community. We could start to do what the church is made to do. Because really, that's what Jesus did. Remember Jesus taking Peter fishing? Right?
Yeah.
That was where he started. And then they went hiking, and then they got in a boat and they went boating, and they did life together. And as they did life together, the disciples began to catch this big idea of a great commission and bringing other men along to do this kind of thing. And that is really exciting for me.
That's right. Yeah, we can live out our faith every day. We don't have to necessarily be in a pew to live out our faith and to have moral lessons taught from the Scripture. Stephen, tell our folks where they can find out more about your work, and maybe some folks are either interested in joining a Trail Life USA program near them, or they're interested in starting one. Give us a little info there.
Yeah, well, one of the resources we have as far as raising godly boys, raisinggodlyboys.com is a website we have, and there's an ebook we put together that you can grab. When we talk about video games in there, we talk about this idea of scoring being kept and challenge being clear and friends being commissioned and victories being celebrated, and how do we raise godly boys in a video game generation? That's a topic we deal with. But traillifeusa.com is our website. So I mentioned raisinggodlyboys.com. That is there. But traillifeusa.com, if you come to our page, you'll see a start a troop button and a join a troop button. And we would love to see Trail Life in churches across America. As a matter of fact, we have a campaign to have a Trail Life troop within 30 miles of 90% of boys in America in the next 8 years. And so we are aggressively going after that because we believe this is the kind of thing that every boy in America needs access to.
Amen. Hey, Stephen Ashton, thanks so much for coming on the program.
I appreciate it, Walker. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. That's Stephen Ashton, National Director of Marketing over at Trail Life USA. Excellent program. Appreciate their work. Recommend them highly. And they're the Christian alternative to the woke Boy Scouts, which is a travesty to see the direction that they've gone, the Boy Scouts, that is. You know, what brought up this topic with Stephen is this study on the video games and how for, every year that you play a video game as a young person, you're decreasing your interest in education by 2 percentage points every single year. So, I mean, imagine the effects of this from ages 6, 7, 8, all the way through high school and college. It just, it's not productive. And it's not just unproductive, it's harmful. And so this is one of these topics that we can all make a difference on. So a lot of things you hear on American Family Radio or when, reading the news, you go, man, I just wish I could make a difference. I wish I could make an impact, right? I wish I were a congressman. I wish I were a senator. I wish I were a justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. And you get, all these different positions of authority in our country where you feel like, hey, if I was just there, I would make a difference. Folks, here's the reality. There is millions of young boys and young girls, but let's just talk about young boys because that's where this study came from. There's millions of young boys in this country that need a dad. And millions of them, for whatever reason, don't have a father figure. Many of them don't even have their father in their life. The divorce rate is over 50%. Even amongst the church is about 50% amongst people who profess Christianity. Tragic. But I've said this before, you've heard this before. The root cause of America's societal ills, obviously, is the root is spiritual. We live in a fallen world. And where light doesn't exist, darkness takes over. That's how it works. And in the context of the family, which is one of the 3 institutions that God himself established, America has a family problem. We have a missing dad problem. We have a missing mom problem. And when our young people grow up without the mother and the father figure that they need in their life for a litany of reasons, there's a void there. There's a void there. And we wonder why that young people are on record levels of ADHD medicine, anxiety medicine, and seeing therapists and record levels of depression, etc. It's because the family that God created has been broken in our country. And not just broken, but de-emphasized. Where single parenting has become the norm, divorce has become mainstream, fatherless young boys is rampant everywhere you turn. And so back to what you can do everybody can do something. So let's just speak to the men out there. Number one, if you're a father, you need to be a godly husband to the mother of your children, and you need to be a godly father to your children and teach them the things of God and build a relationship with them to fend off these dark traps of the evil one that we're talking about here. And we truly have to become countercultural. Like, we have to see, what is the world doing wrong? And as Christians, we need to do the opposite. And what is the opposite? The opposite is godliness. But this is the prescription that everybody has access to in this country. You don't have to be a congressman. You don't have to be a senator. You don't have to be a governor. You don't have to run for city council to ensure that the young men in your life know what biblical masculinity is like, know what it means to have a father or a father-like figure in their life. You guys listening can do that. You can be that. And if we'll begin to rebuild God's design for marriage and family in this country, it will have massive downstream implications on our civics, on our entertainment, on our economy, and on the overall culture of the American landscape. We'll be back in a few.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Core here on American Family Radio. Walker Wildman here with you. Chris Woodward's in studio with us, as he is each Friday. Hey, Chris, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Chris, let's talk a little bit of economy. We could probably do this in our sleep because we do most weeks. And one of your topics or areas of coverage for American Family News is the economy. The market took a few bumps in recent weeks, but seems to be recovering. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's some of the days that it's been down. Stated reasons for losses would include things like the lack of a trade deal between China and the U.S., although there have been days where things were doing very well based on the optimism or likelihood that we could be getting a trade deal with China. Keep in mind that President Trump has already said several times he is going to meet with China's leader to talk about trade. They're going to get together in the near future, South Korea, I think it is, to try to hash something out. That should be a very positive day for everybody in their 401k.
Yeah, absolutely. And that needs to be done. I mean, we can't go past year one of President Trump with no trade deal with China or South Korea. China and the U.S., we're kind of, this is a big deal. This has broad economic implications. I'm talking about getting a trade deal or not.
Yes.
Because right now we're kind of doing the whole ebb and flow of tariffs and no tariffs and tariffs and no tariffs with President Trump as they try to work out a deal. But last I checked, China is freezing rare earth mineral exports, including to the U.S. And other nations. I think they're trying to use this as leverage.
Yeah.
China has a problem. We both have problems. China has a population problem because of their terrible, unbiblical one-child policy that they had for decades, that they've since rescinded, and now they're paying people to have babies. America needs China to buy our debt, and others, but we need China to buy our debt. And we don't need China to continue cozying up to the Russias of the world. So there's multiple interests at play here. Ultimately, free and fair trade needs to be restored between the U.S. and China in order for President Trump's economy to really blossom. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah. A lot of people have said, we just need to make more of our own stuff. Forget China. We tried. Let's move on. We can't do that today.
Not fully.
No,
we can try.
Yeah, consumers, whether they realize it or not, need some goods to be made in China and other places that don't require $7.25, $7.50 an hour or more. Part of the reasons why dollar stores are as popular as they are is because they can get stuff in bulk and then sell it to somebody for $1.25 and make a profit on a spatula or whatever it is out there. We need those kinds of products to be made in cheaper places because our wages are too high, plus all the other stuff that businesses are required to pay for, which is why it's expensive to make things here as opposed to, let's say, in 1965 or 1970. So the U.S. economy does need somebody like a China to make things, but also China needs America to feed them. A lot of our soybean products, a lot of our beef and our pork and our chicken products do go to places like China because they've got they've got a workforce that's being able to afford meat now as opposed to previous generations. They want to eat just like we need to eat. And so they rely on us for things just like we need them to make our cheap products that we can't afford to make anymore and make a business out of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we need to reshore certain manufacturing sectors, especially ones that are critical to national security and to our economy. But yeah, as I've talked on with Jerry Boyer on the program, we don't need to be making everything, right? We don't need to be making, $3 toys that you buy, at Walmart.
But we're going to throw away anyway.
Yeah, we need to be making computers. We need to be making chips. We need to be making pharmaceutical, all of our pharmaceutical products, things like that, different national security related items we need to be making. But yeah, speaking of farmers, Chris, I've spoken to a farmer recently. Agriculture has taken a hit.
Yes.
Farmers are in a bad situation. We're talking about the latest stat I saw was up to 30 to 40% of farms could shut down this year if the government doesn't intervene.
Yeah, and that's the last thing you want in a large chunk of the country that supports Trump, that voted for Trump, and by the way, is going into a midterm election year.
Yeah.
Where a lot of those people are going to be told, hey, you were told this guy was going to make it better. You're obviously hurting. Side with us now, and the Democratic government of the future will make sure that farmers are taken care of, just like we did back during the 40s and the 50s with farm bills and things of that nature.
Yeah.
They really are hurting. And to be honest with you, I mean, we're talking about people losing their more than just the farms, but also their homes, their livelihoods.
Yeah, everything.
Where are they going to go? These are people that have been raised farmers. They're not going to go learn to code or whatever Biden wanted people to do.
I know.
Back in economic hard times.
I remember he said that. Chris, one of the leading causes of the hardship amongst farmers is the rising input cost in order to produce the agricultural products, the end product that you end up selling. A lot of those input costs, virtually all of them, they spiked after COVID.
Yes.
During and after COVID. I mean, they were just skyrocketing. I mean, doubling in some instances, the input cost. And the output cost, or the profits, if you will, from the output, in some years they were decent, right, in order to kind of keep up with those input costs. But I'm looking now at commodity prices, and I know you've got some of that. Commodity prices have bottomed. I mean, they have tanked. We're talking about numbers going back to the 70s.
Yeah.
The last time some of these commodity prices were this low. But the input costs that these farmers are having to foot the bill for to plant the crops and to harvest, et cetera, those haven't dropped, at least not in the same regard.
Yeah. And, you look at like diesel fuel, the national average for a gallon of diesel this week was $3.62, which was more than it was at this time last year. We have to figure out a way to bring down the price of diesel.
So diesel's higher right now than it was this time last year?
And supposedly it's because of demand and things like that. We've got to figure out a way, and I don't know how to do it because I have a BA in communication, but we have to figure out a way to get diesel to $3 or less.
I agree.
Because that would help so many people, not just farmers, but even consumers who drive EVs. Because diesel is how the product you're buying in a store got to that store.
Correct.
And we have to find a way to bring down diesel.
And
it would mean so much.
Gasoline has to be to $2 or less.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that maybe
In
hindsight's-
Mississippi, we're 40 cents from there.
Yes.
We're 240 right now.
We pay below average prices, praise God. But I mean,
Correct.
like hardworking Americans, God-fearing people in states like California, and yes, they do exist.
Yeah.
They're paying like $4 or $5 a gallon,
That's
depending on
right.
where they're living. You can't live like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. The diesel cost, that's very interesting. Why it's not being relieved more, even with Trump's policies. I think it'll take time. Chris, another factor here, and this is why when President Trump was sworn in, I told the audience, look, this isn't going to be we blink and then everything's hunky dory.
We talked about that.
Yeah,
yes.
this has got a lot of mess to clean up.
Yeah.
Because let's talk about just energy. Every day I'm reading headlines about skyrocketing energy costs because we're putting these AI mega data centers online every month, and we're not upping our utility production.
Right.
So electricity costs are continually rising and have been since COVID with no end in sight, with the exception there's some nuclear facilities that they're working on. But Chris, that's 12, 24 months down the road.
Yeah. And that's on top of, an electric bill is on top of everybody else's, all the other expenses that you have to pay. Things like your mortgage, things like maybe your health insurance bills, credit card bills. People are still swiping plastic when they're buying things. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But many people, because of a situation that's far too time intensive to try to explain, are still swiping a credit card to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And so there are all kinds of bills, and it's still a conversation amongst some Americans on we can have this or we can do this month.
Yeah.
It's an unfortunate situation. I still hold out to our prediction that probably things will really start to move in a very positive direction by spring of next year, which would, again, as we've talked about on the show, be a positive for Republicans. In that, look, we said we would fix it. It took us some time, like we said it would.
Yeah.
But vote us back in, and we'll continue to make it better.
Yeah, the only area that they're going to really have to get on fast to see relief is the power, the power production, which is energy, but not just energy like gas and diesel, but homes. How do we fuel homes, which gets into coal, natural gas, wind, solar, nuclear. They're going to have to, and President Trump has already declared a national emergency on this, like day one of his administration. So they're probably using all the deregulatory authorities that they have, but we've got to get these nuclear facilities online.
Yeah.
These modular nuclear reactors, we got to get them online and get them online fast. And Chris, this proves a point that we're going to have consecutive terms of like-minded presidential leadership.
Yeah.
Obviously, President Trump's on his last term. But whether it's J.D. Vance or otherwise, this country cannot, in I guess it would be 2029, January of 2029, we cannot resort to a Gavin Newsom presidency of strangling the American economy. That's just not going to work.
Yeah. A number of people have jokingly said things like Newsom will do to America what he's done to California if he's elected and put into the White House. But you're right. You can't have an every 4 years, this is the way we're going to do it. It messes with the stock market. It messes with consumers. It impacts everything.
Companies, yeah.
And you cannot have, a lot of people don't realize this, but really a business model needs to be 10 years or more for things to really be working. And it takes a while to get stuff going. For an administration to come in and go, we're not doing fossil fuels anymore, it's going to be at least 18 months before they can really get policies in place to even go after that.
Right.
And then, because it's going to be a midterm election season by that point, they have to be careful what they do because you don't want to cause seats in the House and Senate.
Yeah.
And then it takes another year to really get that going. And by that point, somebody in the debate stage goes, this guy made your life terrible. Vote us in. And then we're back to the same situation.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And Chris, we were on the precipice of some pretty, we went through a pretty hard time with Biden. I don't want to underestimate or state that. But we were spared. The Biden and the inflation getting out of control, that had some serious opportunity to go more south than it already did.
Yeah.
Because with this modern monetary theory, it's not built for inflation. It's not built for high levels of inflation. It's built for 2 to 3%. But when you get hyperinflation, which we didn't get there, but we could have, if you were to go into the hyperinflation realm, and this debt snowball, this deficit snowball that gets out of control, you're talking about something that leads to mass economic collapse, which thankfully we've since avoided. But I guess my point is you keep teetering with this socialism and communism every 4 years with a different president. Eventually, it gets to the point where it doesn't matter how, whether you give Trump 4 years or J.D. Vance 4 years, you keep going back to the same old ways that are failing. Eventually that becomes irreversible and it's just unsustainable.
Yeah, I think this brings us back to the conversation about energy. You really have to have that conversation. You need to bring people over. You need to have a summit. You need to get things going because energy, as we've talked about on the show, is a big reason why inflation was as bad as it was. So you need sound energy policy to bring inflation down.
Yeah.
Government needs to quit spending like a drunken sailor as well. And all those things, when they come together, it makes life easier. Many people, they sleep well at night knowing their 401k is doing better since Trump re-entered office, but they also wake up at 3 a.m. wondering how they're going to pay the bill next week.
Right.
And there's all those things that energy policy will help if we can actually get people back to the table and reopen the government and get all this stuff going.
Yeah. Yeah, and back to the agricultural subject, I mean, let's just say I think it's pretty much a given, whether we like it or not, farmers are going to have to be bailed out or aided, however you want to frame it. Bailed out sounds negative, but that's just what's happening.
Yeah.
Farmers are going to have some kind of aid this year. I mean, we're talking probably tens of billions of dollars in financial aid for farms. So that's going to have to come. That can't happen when the government's shut down. And then, then the question comes up, how often do we have to do this? Like, is this going to be a common thing where we have to bail out our agricultural industry because our government policies are unsustainable? I mean, that's not a good way to operate. And this agriculture is like one of the backbones of America's economy.
Well, one of your guests on this show, it's been a while since he's been on here, but Andy Gibson here in Mississippi has talked about how food security is national security.
That's right.
So while bailout may not be a comfortable term people have used or they want to hear, you're probably better off bailing out a farmer than you are somebody in the tech sector who's making a product that many other people are also making.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But like, we need food. We can't rely on Canada or Mexico or other people because they themselves have needs in their country that their farmers are trying to meet.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And China's actually looking elsewhere for their food. They're looking at Brazil and other places. They're trying to thumb their nose.
You got a big port down there?
President Trump. Yeah, they're building it. And so it's interesting dynamic. We really need a trade deal with China. That's a fact. We need a trade deal with China. We need to reshore a lot of manufacturing, a lot of critical manufacturing, but we can't reshore it all. And we're joined at the hip with China economically in many regards, and that's just a reality. Chris, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, don't forget, check out American Family News, AFN.net. Read all the news stories there, all from a Christian perspective. If you want true news, go to AFN.net. We'll see you next time.